Now, was this a little more fluid reading for you? It was for me. I was appalled the other day when I read those, first two assignments. It was, wow. And of course, the point of the beginning is to ease into that type of material, to give background and so forth. So, what I wanted to get to 2 times ago. Now, you'll find some things repeated here. Some things are in this volume, Reflections on Reality, number 2, that are in the what's now number 1, Mind-Only Buddhism in Tibet. There are some paragraphs, and I'm eliminating them in Reflections on Reality. When I thought they were going to be published by 2 different publishers or 3 publishers, I thought, well, there are certain things that you've got to have in there to maintain continuity. There are some repetitions in the absorption and no external world, but they will remain. They're needed. Just to get context before you plunge into some tricky issue. Now, what's the latest chart? Oh, Shenwang R, Denpa Trupa, right? Yondrup Denpa Trupa Yin. Shenwang, Ranshingi Trupa Tang, Rangerne Trupa Yin. And Gunda is also, and Yondrup is also, right? We made that difference between Ranshingi Trupa and Rangerne Trupa on the one side, and Denpa Trupa and Rangitsenyiki Trupa on the other side. Denpa Trupa and Rangitsenyiki Trupa Tang, Tön Tambar Trupa are more substantial, but we still haven't figured out exactly how they're more substantial. Okay. Just different book. Ngoni Song, Rangshin Song, Tsenyi Song. Now, the Sanskrit of these 3, as far as I'm concerned, is the same thing. Trisvabhāva. I have not found anything that indicates that they are not. For instance, I do know that Ngoni Mebasum, we have Ngoni Mebasum. They don't say Rangshin Mebasum, Tsenyi Mebasum. No, it's Ngoni Mebasum. But that is, Ni Swabhavata without the 3. You know that word already. Ni Swabhava. So Swabhava is coming across as no and ta as ni. Now the tree Swabhava, it's very clear that these are the Rangshin Sung. So it seems that coming into Tibetan, 2 different translations were used by the same people. Probably because I don't know why. I've never, usually you can smoke it out after a while. So like the most common translation of Swabhava into Tibetan is Rangshin. And then in this context also you get Ngoni Sum and Ngoni Mebasum, for whatever reason. So those are 3 synonyms. If you're doing Ngoni Sum, it would then be Shenwang Ki Ngoni, right? Gunda Ki Ngoni, Yondrup Ki Ngoni. And, Rangshin Sum Shao Sena, Gunda Ki Rangshin, Yondrup Ki Rangshin, Tsenyi Sum Shao Sena, Shenwan Gitsenyi, Gunda Gitsenyi, Yonru Gitsenyi. Now, before I get into, but it's very dangerous, the topic I wanted to talk about last time. We're doing Shenwan first, Gunda second, and Yonru third. Now, when Buddha taught the three, when he taught the Ngoni Mevasum, he taught Gunda Tsenyi Ngoni Meva first, Shenwan Gyo Ngoni Meva second, Chentamba Ngoni Meva third. Now, nobody says this. No Tibetan scholar has ever said it to me, and I haven't found it in any book. So then you say, well, why did Buddha teach the Ngoni Mevasum in this order, and yet he says that he teaches Shenwan first? Okay? He's got two orders. Now, in fact, he even said he teaches Shenwan Gyo Ngoni Meva first, but that means he teaches Shenwan first. You can see by the context. Now, why does he have these two orders? I think that since the non-existent imputational nature is totally, oh, you didn't catch me, is totally non-existent, he gave something that was totally non-existent first. Because with the statement, Chur Tamche Ngoni Meba Yin, right? It sounds to the mind-only people as if nothing exists at all. Nothing has any nature at all. So he tells them first that Megyu Gunda Tsenyi Ngoni Meba, and that's what's totally non-existent. Then he goes on to say that Shenwan, however, are just Gyewa Ngoni Meba, meaning they're not Tsenyi Ngoni Meba. And that Yonrup is Trentamba Ngoni Meba. It's not Gyewa Ngoni Meba because he gave as his description. Now you would think that Yonrup was Gyewa Ngoni Meba, lacking production in general, because it doesn't have production. But in his description of what Gyewa Ngoni, I'm shouting, in his description of what Gyewa Ngoni Meba means, he says that these are things that are in the meaning of Gyewa Ngoni Meba. He says that it has two parts. They're not arisen from themselves or by themselves, and they arise in dependence on other conditions. You see, that is the meaning of Gyewa Ngoni Meba. When you look at the term itself, just the term, it would seem that both Gunda and Yonru are Gyewa Ngoni Meba. But because he specifies in the sutra itself the meaning of Gyewa Ngoni Meba, it can only be applied to Shenwan. Now this is a point that it seems some scholars have missed, and it's a point one can debate on and so forth, and make a mess out of other people's assertions. You make a mess in order to communicate the point. And therefore, some people say that Tsenyi Ngoni Meba and Gunda are not synonymous, that this column and this column, respectively, are not synonymous. But Jime Tamcho Gyatso says they are, and he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's no. Jamyang Sheba suggests that they are not in one of his minor works on this Lekshe Nyingbo, the essence of the Buddha explanation, the essence of fellowship. So, Shenwan, Gyewa Ngoni, right? Now, why was I drawing this? Oh, it was just to straighten out. We got into the topic of three names for the same thing, and it was to straighten out as a subsidiary topic the order and why I gave you Shenwan first, Gunda second, and Yonru third. Tibetans always put Gunda first. Always. Why? Because Gunda Tsenjingo Nimeba is taught first. And that's carried over to the listing of the three natures. But it is, as far as I'm concerned, unjustifiably, I mean, it's justifiably carried over because you have this order. But I have suggested here that it's best to learn it in terms of Shenwang, Gunda, and Yondru. Thank you, that's just what I want. Why? Because, again, first, one needs to know that all of these phenomena and my pleasure and my pain and so forth arise in dependence upon other conditions. Those other conditions are my own actions. And thus, I have to reform my behavior. Body's physical, verbal, and mental behavior in order to mold my own future. And then, once a person has thereby gotten on the path used loosely, then the person can learn that Gunda, the Megyu Gunda, is Meva. Megyu Gunda being identified to this point as the main one, as being a difference of entity of subject and object. That allows you to get a hold of what's refuted in emptiness, what's negated. What is negated in emptiness? A difference of entity of subject and object. That allows you to, you start exploring, what is this difference of entity of subject and object? And you notice, well, things certainly do appear that way. And the claim is being made that there isn't a difference of entity of subject and object. And you begin studying reasonings in order to undermine your belief in this illusion. It's not that the phenomena are illusions, it's that the sense of difference of entity of subject and object are illusions. In the sense of being totally non-existent. The phenomena are illusion-like, in that they appear one way but exist another way. Illusion-like. There's a difference between illusion and illusion-like. And then one can realize Yondru, which is the absence of the imputational nature in other powered natures. It's really a crucial point, and frankly, it took me years and years to get beyond this thing of putting Gunda first and Shenwang second. It's right there in the text. You can abstract it in a different order. So, if you tell a Tibetan scholar you've been studying the Ngoni Sum, and you begin with Shenwang, immediately think you don't know your ass from your elbow. Now, the person probably think, well, that's pretty good that you know the names of all three. And praise you highly for that. Or if the person's of a more dynamic, or what do you say, character will scold you. Gain Nemo was like that. I was so afraid of him, didn't want to invite him to the University of Virginia. It's really terrible. He's a great scholar. He appreciated texts of not just his college, but other colleges. But he's irascible. That was his mode of teaching. And like when he'd ask a question, people would just be afraid to answer. It takes some really brave person because he'd knock him down like shit. And I just felt, man, I'm not going to say anything. Which was just the lack of my own bravery. And we're bringing us when we're first bringing Tibetan scholars here. And I thought, well, to have somebody like this who didn't look because it's going like that. Who didn't look the part, would make it all the more difficult. Who is this? Gain Yima? Since passed away. Anyway, now, there was one more subsidiary topic that led me to. Now, these can be applied in any tenet system. You just have to change what the Mekyugunda is. A Yondrup will be the absence of that reification in Shenwan. Applied to any system. But the system that used this the most was the mind-only system, and then also the yogic autonomy school, the Yogacara Swatantrika Madhyamaka school, the subdivision of the middle way school called Swatantrika Madhyamaka, who never called themselves Swatantrika, the name that they got in Tibet. Okay, now to today's topic. So, Shenwan are Rangitsini Gitruba. Shenwan, Rangitsini Gitruba Yin. But Shenwan are not, this is another type of Mekyugunda. There's just two main ones, and two subtle ones in the mind-only school. Don't think it'll go on forever. Although there is another way of expressing this one that we'll get to. And this is within the same one. Rangzin Dokbe Shenshir. Rangzin, say it, Rangzin.
Rangzin.
Dokbe.
Dokbe.
Shenshir.
Shenshir.
My Sanskrit teacher one of my Sanskrit teachers at Wisconsin said, just go around saying things, in this case, Dokba, 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 Dokba. Rangzin Dokbe Shenshir. Rangzin Dokbe Shenshir. It's very good to work from sound as soon as you can, not from the written word. You don't have to know what something means to say it again. That's how you learn really to speak a language. You don't have to know what it means. That's when I finally put it together how to speak Tibetan. I just repeat, and then you can think about the meaning. It's sort of like, what kind of a goofball am I that I can't repeat something that I don't know what it is? Now, when you listen to somebody with the extraordinary ability to speak, such as the Dalai Lama, and really is extraordinary, he, I think, just, he doesn't think Rang, Zin, Do, Bei, Shin, Shir, Rang, Gi, Tsen, Ni, Gi, Truba. It's Rang, Zo, Bei, Shin, Shir, Rang, Tsen, Gi, Truba. Rang, Zo, Bei, Shin, Shir, Rang, Tsen, Gi, Truba is one unit. One unit. The unitizing, and so when you practice, you have to unitize small, then unitize large. Right? Until you can say that, don't jump to some longer unitizing. Now you've gotten to that level, and then there's one more level of just unitizing the whole thing, thinking of it as one unit. And then you can hear it as one unit, and you won't be confused when you hear it as one unit. I didn't ask him if that was what he did, but it's obvious after a while that that's what he does. Now, so we know Rangitsini Gitruba, established by way of its own character, as the basis of maybe determination, adherence of a conceptual consciousness, Dokpa, apprehending it. Now Rangzin is, I forget why it's put in there, it's just to cover up some fault. it can't be conceptual consciousness apprehending something else. So, Shenshir, I end up translating as referent, just to make it easy. Established by way of its own character as the referent of a conceptual consciousness apprehending. A conceptual consciousness apprehending this table is one thinking, either thinking this is, a table or just table, or just a conceptual consciousness that's thinking of a table without the word table. You don't have to have words. Sometimes the words and meaning are associated. Sometimes the words and meaning are not associated. And I think that when I was reading Betsy's book the other day, she was using our standard translation of Dokpa. Now, a determinative knower is what the text says. A determinative cognition or knower or whatever, right? It doesn't mean a person. Knower doesn't mean a person. A determinative knower that apprehends daji tongue, junji.
Isn't there debate about that in Changya, the meaning of dratan?
Yes. Whether it's jai turn or daji tunji. Well, once you talk about jerung, then you have to have two things. I would say that's where I would start with Jangya to discuss. Jangya, sorry, not Jangya. So, George Dreyfus liked the word determinative knower, and I guess we must have had that before George came. Maybe it isn't his favorite. Determinative knower that apprehends daji and tunji. Now, the book says as suitable to be mixed. I question as. Now, daji means, one interpretation of daji, as Ladhiramche says, it's merely, if I say to you, ni panimai. Now, unless you know Russian, you haven't got the faintest idea of what I'm saying. Paruski ni panimai. Which I learned in New Jersey because there were a lot of Russians. I'd always think I spoke Russian, so I'd say, Paruski ni panimai. And they'd think, he does know Russian. You know Russian? Ni panimai means don't know. Don't know. So now all you had with ni panimai, unless you knew Russian, probably was the reverberation of the sound in your conceptual consciousness, ni panimai, ni panimai, ni panimai, right? Now that's one way of taking daji, a term generality, a generic of just the term, you see, just the sound generality. And then take tunji when you actually get to the meaning and you realize that nipanimai, means don't know. Or, of course, we're talking about things that are all mental. In some language, the word for jokse, right? That you didn't know. And then you understand, oh, this is jokse or table. So, tunji means the meaning generality. When you get to the meaning of the object, conceptually, not looking at it, but conceptually, you're talking to somebody not in the presence of a table, and an image of a table flashes through your mind. Now, the problem is that there's a whole lot in between here, where you think Nipanimai means Santa Claus, and Santa Claus appears to your mind, associated with Nipanimai. And that is not a Chunji, so the only thing it can be is a Gaji, right? This is very wide then. So I guess rather than saying that there are two systems, one that takes Gaji just to be a reverberation, conceptual reverberation of the sound. You see one way of thinking, just to be that, and the other way is to take it to be sort of like whatever appears to your mind that isn't the right thing. And why not take both? Why not? Why not lump these two systems together? Nobody says that Turnji is, as far as I know, is so wide that it includes wrong, but seashore appearing to your mind when you think Nipanimai. As the meaning of Nipanimai. It could flash to your mind, because you said it last time you said Nipanimai was on the beach, right? Now, as suitable to be mixed, I think is wrong, the as. Why? Because this can be a determinative Noah that apprehends just Taji, or just Turnji, or apprehends or associates, that's what Te tends to mean, associates these two. And I think when people talk about intuition, they're mainly talking about just apprehending Turnji without getting involved with words. That you see, it's a step before clairvoyance. Intuition doesn't have to be clairvoyance, right? Doesn't have to be direct perception. But it really seems to people, to any of us, to be direct perception because we're not doing it with words. Like a doctor who just has a glance at you and assembles a huge amount of data and says, phlegm problem, okay? And you've got to take, whatever. And you see it's done on a nonverbal level, but conceptual. You see how broad conceptual is in this system, in Buddhism, all these levels. So how could the meaning of Topa be a determinative knower that apprehends these two as suitable to be mixed? Because it doesn't have to apprehend those two. And it doesn't have to apprehend them as suitable to be mixed. Do you follow? Otherwise, when we have these nonverbal conceptual consciousnesses, we wouldn't have a conceptual consciousness. Or when a baby thinks of something, like mother's breast or whatever, then that wouldn't be a conceptual consciousness. Well, but it is. So I think do means in such a manner that Gaji and Turnji would be suitable to be associated, would be suitable. And that's just what Ladi Rinpoche says in his explanation of it. Just what he says. And so you've got to run do back to, this is Terum du is an adverbial accusative, which it's called teni. Why is it called teni? That do, teni kita. Grammatically. Why? Because adverbs are part of the shenri, right? They're modifiers of the shenri. This crunches, terum du, crunches as the manner of the apprehension. Do you follow? what's being apprehended are jaji or turnji or both, in what sort of a manner, and if we say in the manner of, in English, that prepositional phrase is an adverbial prepositional phrase that modifies the verb. So it's called tenyi, like the same thing, because this is the same thing as the verb, meaning it's in that unit of the verb. It's in the unit of the verb. It's a modifier. So it's called tenyi guja. Now, tenyi can be translated as, and the other is, you see, if you think of adverbial ones that are like this, in the manner of. And you have to add in, for this one, would be, that's really a meaning that's added in. Would, the would part of it, right? In the manner of, so apprehending jaji or turnji or both, in the manner of their being suitable to be associated. Now, even a baby does that, even though the baby doesn't think this is suitable to be associated with some word, do you follow? But it's the type of apprehension that a determinative knower, a conceptual consciousness does. Now, Rinpoche only gives it as an example, think as a determinative knower, thinking this is such and such. But the baby is apprehending it in a manner such that when the baby learns breast, or what do babies learn breast? I don't know. But anyway, bed or whatever, it fits. Okay, so even though Shenwang are Rangitsiniki Truba, they're not established by way of their own character as the reference of a conceptual consciousness. And Rangitsin, you can just sort of forget about, but it's there. Sometimes they just say, Dokwe Shinshi Rangitsiniki Truba. But in order to get out of some debates, some problems, like just any Dokwa, you know? Would a table be, are we misconceiving it to be Dokwe Shinshi Rangitsiniki Truba? It's just a Dokwa. Rather, Rangitsin Dokwe Shinshi Rangitsiniki. It's nice that somebody figured that out and added words in, but Tsongkhapa himself doesn't worry about that too much. So then this is the other main Megyugunda. Rangitsin Dokwe Shinshi Rangitsiniki Truba, Megyugunda. Megyugunda Zo Jire. Megyugunda Zo. Now, what is this? Do we see a cement block as established from its own nature as the referent of a conceptual consciousness? I don't mean of one just saying cement block. You see, Dokwa is much wider than that. But just as a referent of the conceptual consciousness, you know, that's thinking about it. It doesn't mean just that the conceptual consciousness has to impute the words, although it could. So it's not saying, oh, well, it's not just saying, this isn't established by way of its own character as a referent of a conceptual consciousness thinking cement block. So we can all understand that this isn't established by way of its own character as the referent of a conceptual consciousness thinking cement block, because it doesn't have to be called cement block. That's not what's being taught here. Although, we tend to see things that way. If it's anything, it's a cement block. And these other people are speaking foreign languages. It's really a cement block. It's like when you hear people at another table, and I had a friend who was joking, why don't they speak English? Which would mean like, why don't they speak language? Rather, it has something to do with the suitability of its being the referent of a conceptual consciousness or of a term. A conceptual consciousness, thinking cement block or of the term cement block. To have term, then you have to know the term. Thinking, you know, not just, when I say cement block, you have to add in any other language too. That language, that this is a referent of any language by way of its own character, that it ultimately is so. And this is fascinating. Because in one way you can say, oh yeah, I understand that. But another way you say, my God, if it wasn't established by its own character as the referent of my thoughts and terms, then what the hell is it? You know? Everything becomes a blob. And you see, that's why they say Buddha taught to persons of a lower type that things are established by way of their own character as the reference of a conceptual consciousness apprehending. We'll leave that out. Apprehending gets to be just too long. He taught that because for those people who would think everything would just become too airy, too trying to think of the Tibetan word that Kun Kong uses. So next time we'll talk about terms, I guess, not this time, we won't pile on too much this time, another way of saying the same thing. Now, what does this have to do with the difference of entity of subject and object? If this is a subtle object of negation, meaning the Meju-kunda Chamo, and difference of entity, Dzin, Setade Dutruba, the establishment of object apprehended and apprehended object and apprehending subject as different substantial entities. Okay? Ngo Tade Dutruba or Ze Tade Dutruba. Ze when you can be used for impermanent things. Ngo for permanent or for a mixture of permanent and impermanent. For instance, a mental consciousness paying attention to uncompounded space. Uncompounded space is permanent, the mental consciousness is impermanent, okay? Now what's the relationship between these two types of Meju-kunda and thus the relationship with the two types then of Yongru? Because Yongru is constituted by the emptiness of these two, right? And it is a quality of every single object that we're not paying attention to. So you have these two qualities, these two Yongrus that we don't pay attention to. We pay attention just to other qualities, whether they're exaggerated or not, right? So not everything has to be an exaggeration just because it's empty of these two things. What is the relationship? Now, wasn't somebody mentioning last time? Well, there's a great deal of scholarship that is brought up that I consider extensively and perhaps ad nauseum. I want to know your opinion. Called Tibetan Views on the Two Emptinesses. Ad nauseum. But maybe not ad nauseum. Not very long, really. It sometimes strikes me as ad nauseum because, you know, I wrote it and it's saying the same thing over and over and over again. And, you know, this scholar says this, and that scholar tweaks it a little bit and says that. This scholar then further tweaks it and says that. And then somebody else has a very good summary that says this. And then as a contemporary scholar, he was contemporary when he taught this to me from Losaling, Kensur Yeshe Thupten, then his startling insight into these two that was never written down previously anywhere. And he's really great on, he was really great on big issues. He came here 3 times. Last time it was discovered he had cancer where the stomach joins the colon. And instead of being operated on here for his death to be more pleasant, he determined that he should be operated on in New Delhi. And in fact, he did have a good death. Worked out. They did some prognostications, and you know, you would think, well, you get the choice of UVA, you better take UVA over some hospital in New Delhi. But he chose New Delhi. That was his business. And he had a very good death. I saw him in New Delhi. One thing he was doing at the time was gathering money for his college. That was something he wanted to do before he died. And he put the squeeze on it, among others. He was, people had told him that you get cancer if you're hung up, you know, worrisome and so forth. And so, you know, he'd keep saying, oh, I'm not worrisome, you know, I'm just not, I'm a live and let live type person. And he really was. He was laid back, but brilliant. And but he knew how to pace his life. Well, a psychic from New Zealand who was in Tibet told me one of the nicest places to go to is in a cancer ward. Just the best people, wonderful people. And he said what they do is they give too much, and they don't, you know, keep the cup a good ways full here. They empty the cup out. Now that was very interesting. Wow, a really different view. Opposite view. Anyway, so his view, I'll give you the punchline. His view was, you have a namer and a named. You see? Subject and object. And you're using names for that. Now, a gross example is, you bastard. Right? Huge gulf. All right? But even when you say Mary, or Mary, there's a namer and a named. And thus, along with namer and named, with this sense that the name, the suitability to be named, subsists in the object itself. The suitability to be named subsists in the object itself is a sense of difference of entity of subject and object. Marvelous description. Really, you know, after years and years of studying this and wondering about it, and there are European, American, and Japanese scholars who say that these two types of emptiness are not to be associated, you see? And Tsongkhapa addresses the issue. They are to be associated, and uses his own way to prove that they are, just as others use their own ways to prove that they aren't. But Tsongkhapa himself doesn't make that last statement, the statement that was just being made about namer and named, and that along with it goes a difference of entity of subject and object. It's just, it looks artificial. He sort of plops it in there, and all of the other scholars ad nauseum, but it isn't ad nauseum. I'm using T.R.V. Morty's word for referring to the Madhyamaka reasonings in Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle. 27 chapters with multiple reasonings in each chapter. He said ad nauseam. Well, you know, that means you're in the low vehicle. Great vehicle of intelligent people apparently like more and more reasonings in order to approach emptiness many different ways so that you can get at it and crush your belief in their version of the Megukunda. So, then, next time, rather than jumping out from what you just read, let us stay with reflections on reality. So this time we should do reflections on reality 65 to 102. I want to know if you're doing the assignments and if you're finding them just too hard to get through them, because, you know, we should make them shorter or whatever. But we're around 40 pages for this. And you need to know that we're in much easier reading now, much easier reading. Right? Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Then what?
Than what we were doing earlier.
Oh,
Okay? The last assignment and this assignment are much easier reading, and that'll continue for a while until we get to this and to redo the stuff that we did. And then you'll have such fantastic background that most of it will make sense.
Oh, so next time you want a chart saying which are thoroughly established and which are established by means of their own character, and you want that on a chart.
Yeah, which are established by way of their own character, which aren't, and which are Ranshingi Tuba and Ramune Tuba.
Okay.
We're going to get this material straight now, you see.